Good morning. Good morning. This is Cecilia Marlowe with the Federal Savings Bank, and I am super excited today to be sharing the room with Joe Richmond, who is an amazing home inspector, and he's going to give us a ton of nuggets today on understanding the home inspection process, what we should expect as buyers, what we should be looking for. And so I am looking forward to learning a few things myself this morning, Joe. So thank you for joining us.
Okay.
So today is all about understanding the importance of a home inspection. And so this 90-day home buyer challenge has been going on for 8 weeks now, and we have touched on some really amazing topics. We started off with goal setting and how to set yourself up for success as you think about purchasing your new home. Then we went into budgeting, understanding your finances, and so what you have coming in versus what's going out, and how that also plays a role in what you qualify for. We talked about the paperwork that's needed in order to qualify for a mortgage, and how to begin to assemble what we call your loan packet prior to underwriting. We talked a little bit about the underwriting process, and then we talked with a real estate broker about setting expectations, realistic expectations as you are going out to shop for your new home, and then also placing offers and how that works.
Okay, great.
So it's been a very lively conversation that we've had thus far. And I am looking forward to, diving right in today with you, Joe, as we talk about what happens next once a buyer has a home under contract. And so our goals for today are going to be to understand the importance of the home inspection. We're going to talk about the difference between the home inspection and the appraisal.
Okay.
We're also going to share some insights as it relates to what all is covered in the home inspection, what should the buyer expect, during that inspection. And then finally, we're going to round the session out today with, what do we do if we do find problems, and what are the ones that, are really considered deal breakers based off of your experience and your expertise. So,
okay.
So before I allow you to kind of share with us, why the home inspection part of the process of buying a home is so important, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, the company that you have, and just how long you've been in the business, and how did you get started?
Okay, great. So my background is in architecture. I have a degree in architectural studies from Southern Illinois University, and we've been doing home inspections for approximately 19 years now.
Wow, you've seen a lot.
I've seen a lot, yes. Yes. And so we started our home inspection company approximately 17 years ago.
Okay.
With that, started off from the architectural side because we were doing drawings, and with that we did field visits, and they kind of morphed into doing more property inspections.
Okay. So it was really a natural, organic type of process that happened as you were doing the architectural work. Home inspections kind of came into play, and you saw that as an opportunity to really jump in.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. That is awesome. So we have a veteran on the call with us today in our class, and so 19 years of experience in this business is definitely someone that we want to listen to and pay attention to some of the things that we're going to be sharing today. So, Joe, in your opinion, why is the home inspection an important piece in the puzzle to purchasing a home? I often have buyers that ask me, is a home inspection required? And so while it is not a requirement for a loan approval, I always highly encourage a buyer to complete a home inspection, and it's irregardless if we're talking new construction, or if we're talking condo, or if we're talking, a rehab property, or something that, is maybe just a resale that has not been upgraded. But in your opinion, can you share with us a little bit about why the home inspection is such an important piece to the puzzle of purchasing?
A great question. So with the home inspection, you have an unbiased third party that has a trained eye that will be, assisting the buyer in the purchase decision. and providing information, because what we do is we collect a lot of data.
Okay.
Data, we provide a report, and in that report, it kind of lets the buyer know what they're purchasing. It gives them an idea of where they're taking over at. So that buyer will be taken over from the seller left off, whether it be a bank, whether it be an actual occupant of the property, a landlord, what have you. So at that point, then the buyer has the education and the information to make the purchase decision, and that's our part in the.
I love that. I love that. And so I'm going to recap what you said was you collect data to allow the buyer to know where they are picking that property up from. Irregardless of who the previous owner was, they now have a third party, unbiased reflection on the condition of that property, and then can make an educated choice in terms of how to move forward and some of the particulars of the property that they want to be mindful about.
Yes.
Perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the appraisal that the bank orders versus a home inspection, which is independently ordered. And so oftentimes, I find that first-time home buyers in particular kind of look at this as this one and the same, and they are two very distinct reports. So the bank appraisal, which I as the lender would order on behalf of the buyer, is basically to ensure that the value of the property is consistent with the price that the seller is requesting and that you all have ultimately at this point agreed upon. And so we basically have someone to go out to the property and to assess the value based on the dimensions of the property, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, the condition of the property. And it's basically compared with other properties that are similar in nature and in that same, in a certain proximity of the property that you're looking to purchase. And so the appraisal is more so for the bank and to ensure that when we are offering financing, that the value of that property holds in terms of the collateral, right? So we're basically lending to the buyer to say, hey, they have a piece of collateral that they would like to purchase, and that collateral value is solid based on what the contract price is indicative of. So the home inspection on the other end, while there are certain things that the appraiser will pick up depending on the type of financing that you're looking at, because if you're doing FHA, conventional, and or VA, those are three different types of appraisals that are completed, and all of them have their own set of requirements. And so while we're ordering appraisal based on the loan type, the home inspection is thorough. And so it goes through all of the nuts and bolts of the property and really, as Joe just shared with us, gives us an unbiased opinion on the property condition and things to be noted. So I wanted to just touch on, the difference between that bank appraisal and the home inspection. Is there anything else, Joe, that you can think of that differentiates the two?
Sure. So typically when I'm asked that question at a home inspection, I always like to differentiate that typically the appraiser gives valuation to the property, and the home inspection provides information on the existing condition of the property as it stands, at the time of the inspection.
Yep. Perfect. Perfect. I love it. Uh-oh, I skipped a slide. All right. So Joe, can you kind of help us dive into what areas are covered in the home inspection?
Sure. So typically with the standard home inspection, we're looking at everything from the exterior of the property and the grounds, which, will include things within the property boundaries of the inspection. So some of those items may include garages, swimming pools. Some inspectors don't inspect sheds or things outside, but, other inspectors do. So we look at the grounds conditions, the site conditions. So, we'll look at drainage, site drainage. We'll look at, things on the exterior of the property that will affect ultimately what happens within the property. And then when we go into the property, we're looking at everything from the lowest level all the way up to the upper level. So we'll be looking at things like, your basement area, your foundation, structural items, columns, beams, floor joists, wall conditions. We'll be operating plumbing fixtures. We'll be operating electrical devices, doors, windows, floors, ceilings, joists. And we also inspect appliances. We'll be looking in spaces that a lot of people, may neglect to even think about, like attics and crawl spaces. We go into those areas and we, collect the information and provide information to the buyer so that they know what's going on in, throughout, and around the property.
I love it. I love it. So tell me, what types of things on the exterior of the property could impact the interior of the property?
Great question. So typically, a lot of people are concerned with roofs and leakage and water intrusion. So we'll be looking at things structurally, like, is the house leaning? There are things structurally that may impact the interior of the home, like sagging joists or sagging ceiling framing. We'll look at the exterior condition of the roof to make sure that you're getting proper drainage, so that'll also include gutters and downspouts, to make sure that once the water hits the roof surface, that it's being collected into the gutters and then distributed, away from the building. We'll also look at things like walkways and driveways, to make sure that that drainage is going away from the property and not towards the property.
Absolutely.
We'll look at things like decks and stairs, those things may impact the interior if they're not flashed correctly.
Love it. When you say joists, tell me what that means. As a first-time home buyer, I probably have no idea what a joist is.
Great question. So with the structural framing, a joist is a horizontal member that carries load. So when you guys are walking across the floors, something is holding the floors up. And typically those are either floor joists or floor trusses or I trusses. That's what's carrying and distributing the weight to the exterior walls, the columns, and the beams.
Perfect. So basically that's the structure part that I, as a buyer, as I'm walking through, I'm really not paying attention to, because I'm probably more, when I go and see a home, I'm probably looking at, the color of the paint or the nice stainless steel appliances in the kitchen. And, if the bathroom is modern. I am more, as a buyer, I'm looking at the parts and the quality of the home that are pleasing to the eye. And what I hear you saying is that you are looking at the structure of the property, just to ensure that as it looks nice, that it's actually going to, the condition of the property in terms of things that I'm not necessarily thinking about, that those things are maintained or have been well maintained. And if they haven't, you're basically providing some insight on, those key items.
That's true. And so it can also be looked at as health and safety or function. So you think of health, safety, and function, and we're looking at those things because in that information that we're providing, we'll also be telling you about things that, may affect the comfort level of you being on the property.
Good. Can you give me an example of something that health and safety that I as a first-time home buyer might not necessarily think about?
Sure. So, I've been at inspections where, like you were saying, people will look in the kitchen and they love the appliances, but then there may be a leak behind a drain or a toilet or something that may be leaking behind the wall. And you may see a little small puddle of water or some indication that there's some water intrusion, but nobody's really paying attention too much to that because it may be in the mechanical room. Like, I'm not sure what that is, but ultimately, things will start to grow on that, the interior wall. And you're like, well, what are these things, And so we provide information on that to say, hey, you may want to have this plumbing issue fixed because it's not going to fix itself and it's just going to get worse.
Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to talk a little bit now about what the buyer should expect. And so the first question that I'll ask you is, and we're going to, I'm going to be referring to a single family home in this instance. So how long does it typically take to inspect a single family home?
Good question. So typically, you like to plan for somewhere between, depending on the size of the property, somewhere between with enough time to kind of walk around and look at all the items that we look at during the period of a home inspection, and collect that information so that we can intelligently explain some things to the buyers. So if they have a question, we can answer the question. So typically, you want to plan for somewhere between 2 and 3 hours.
Okay, and so with that said, you prefer for the buyer to attend the home inspection? You think that's a good idea?
It's definitely recommended because one of the things that I always tell my clients is that it's more important for you, being the buyer, to understand what's going on in and around the property than it is for anybody else in the transaction because, you being the buyer are going to be there and everybody else will be at home.
Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely. And what questions, the buyers walking in, they've been encouraged to get a home inspection. And so they, follow our guidance. What should that buyer be taking into consideration while they're at the inspection? What should they be asking the inspection? What are some of the questions that you find buyers typically should ask? And do ask, and the ones that they don't ask that they probably should?
That's a great question. So a lot of times at inspections, especially for first-time home buyers, I'll get asked that question. So what should I be asking? And, a lot of times they may not know what to ask. And, I say, well, just start asking questions. Anything that you're concerned about while we're here, just start asking. And that's probably going to lead to more questions. So,
Mm,
as you guys are walking through prior to the home inspection, some people have experiences which they remember, the places that they've lived. You
yeah,
know, the other day that said, I've always had problems with basements where I've lived at, so I'm really concerned about the basement because I don't want things to flood.
mm,
So, if that's a concern of yours, definitely ask the home inspector because
perfect.
that's the best time to kind of point and feel and explain things. So again, that I understands what's going on versus us just having information and you guys not getting a chance to really understand.
Absolutely. Very good. And typically, what is the range of cost for a home inspection on a single family home?
Okay, good, another good question. So depending on the experience of the inspectors, most guys out here are charging anywhere from $250 to $400. So,
Okay.
different people provide other services. They may have different kinds of tools that they want to, include in the inspection or other parts of information that they like to include.
Perfect. I've got a question.
Sure.
Sometimes I find that different home inspectors have different approaches. So with that being said, not I've noticed, or I feel as if not all inspectors, will inspect the roof. Is that something that a buyer should expect? Is that something that is an additional cost or risk to the home inspector? How important is having the roof examined during a home inspection, and what's your take on that?
Good question. So, as far as roof inspections, the state says that if you're not able to safely access a roof, then you have to state that in the inspection.
Okay.
Personally, I'd like to get as much information as I possibly can. Different inspectors have different tools. Some have cameras that they could extend up to 30 feet.
Okay.
They can look at the view if it's not safe to go on the roof. So in conditions like in the wintertime, a lot of times there's snow on the roof, so there's not a lot to see. You know,
Yeah.
so nobody's really gonna go up and shovel all the snow off of a roof to look at the roof surface. So I do think it's important to be able to provide some kind of information, or if it's not safe and it's not visible, recommend that a qualified roofing professional, take a closer look at the roof, or if there's time within the transaction to go out, maybe if, again, if the surface has been, the snow's melted off the roof.
Got it. Very good. So I'm going to throw another question at you that
Sure.
sometimes comes up. So with VA loans, loans that are, specified for individuals who currently or have served in the military, VA requires a termite inspection. Is that something that a home inspector can visibly see and point out for someone who is not necessarily a veteran, but should probably would encourage them to get a termite inspection? Is that something that you find happens?
Good question. So uh, you need to be properly trained in order to talk about wood destroying insects and organisms. So it's not just the carpenter ants or the subterranean termites. You know, you have carpenter bees, you have organisms that can contribute to wood destroying, activity. So,
Okay.
all inspectors may not have that training, and that may be a question that you ask your inspector when you're interviewing your potential inspectors to come look at the property, if that's a concern, to ask if they have that qualification.
Very good. Very good. Love it. All right, we're going to move to the next slide. So, what happens if there are some issues with the property once the inspection is complete? And if you could give maybe a few examples of things that you as an inspector feel a buyer should be nervous about if it comes up in a home inspection and it is not willing to be addressed by a seller.
Good question. So there are a number of things that we come across, especially with the inspections and after the inspection has occurred. So if there are a number of items that, repairs may be recommended or safety defects that we may notice at the property, then, and I'm not a realtor, so I got to put that disclaimer out there, but there's typically an opportunity for the agent and attorney to have a conversation with the buyer to kind of ask them, okay, we found some of these things during the inspection. How do you want to handle it, or how do you want to proceed? So a lot of times there's just some discussion during the inspection and review period, attorney review period, where the buyer may present some options to the sellers to say, hey, we found these defects or repairs, how do you want to handle it? And so the seller in turn has an opportunity to respond to say, hey, I'll address that issue, or I'm not going to address it. And then there's the negotiation part of it, where if there's things that are not going to be addressed by the seller, then the buyer has the opportunity to kind of ask for a concession or something, and then at that point, then, people either agree to move forward with repairs or concessions or move on to a different property.
Perfect. And so, is there anything that you can point buyers to in terms of maybe an online resource? And I didn't prep you for this, so
That's okay.
you want to send me some information later. I often wonder, what is the life of a furnace? What's the average life of a roof expected to be? What's the average life of, the central air unit? So, as a person is reading, or as a buyer is reading through their home inspection, if I see that the average life of a furnace is, 15 years, and we're on year 13, I also share with buyers that home inspections are really there to prepare you for future repairs and or replacements, right? If they are financially in a position, and to prepare them financially, because they don't have a landlord anymore. So, one of the beauties in home ownership is that it is yours. And one of the things that I think we don't necessarily prepare enough for are the financial obligations that come along with the home, and keeping it in good condition once we have it. And so, is there any type of resource online that will point a buyer to, really understanding the mechanicals of a home and life expectancies of some of the major mechanicals?
Yes. So there are numerous, and I'm sure if you Google, life expectancy of, appliances or, house items, there'll be a number of pages.
Okay.
The more frequently used, it's called Inspectopedia.
Okay.
And if you go to inspectopedia.com and you scroll through the tabs, there's a life expectancy chart.
Very good.
It's just a general idea, because the one thing about it is, there's maintenance and things that are considered with those life expectancies. So a lot of times during the inspection, I'll get asked that question, well, how much longer, will this thing last? Well, my answer typically is, we're not sure how it's been maintained before we got here.
Got it.
Better idea because again, you know, you'll be taking over, or the buyer will be taking over where the last person left off. So a lot of times there's an initial evaluation that we may recommend, like with roofs. You know, we typically recommend annual inspections. That way, uh, you know, you have an idea of how much longer things will last because you'll have a licensed professional that's going up there and taking a look. You know, they may be doing some small repairs, you know, missing shingles or, you know, flashings or something like that. With your furnaces, a lot of times people are concerned, especially at this time of year, with their furnace and how long they're going to last. Well, typically with your annual repair and maintenance guys, you know, they can tell you, hey, this part's about to go out. You may want to replace it, and then you may be able to extend the life of this thing for X amount of years.
Perfect. Perfect. And so that was Inspector, Inspector Pedia. Okay.
INSPEA Pedia. So like Apedia.
Apedia. Very good. I wanted to make sure I got that. And so you talked about just annual maintenance around the roof, around probably the gutters, downspouts, furnace, air
Water
conditioning.
heaters, water heaters, furnaces, AC units, roof inspections, and sometimes with the newer appliances, you know, they require some maintenance too with all the diagnostics and the chips that they use in some of the smart appliances that they have now. You know, because they wear out over time, and sometimes things need to be replaced.
Very good. That is very good information to have as it relates to, you know, just the home inspection, what the buyer should expect. That's a great resource, Inspectopedia, to kind of figure out the life expectancy or the average life expectancy of your major mechanicals and when those items will probably need to be replaced based off of the inspection report. And Joe, in your reports, you typically give the like the age of those major mechanicals.
Yeah, typically what we do, we end up taking serial numbers down because some inspectors offer recall warranties. You know, a lot of times those are additional services, but at least if you have the information, then you can go to that particular manufacturer's website to find out if there's recalls, the age of the unit, and sometimes you can even download the maintenance guide so that you have an idea how often these things should be serviced.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have definitely learned a few things today here myself. I appreciate you joining us on the call. And I have all of your information right here online. So if you are a first-time home buyer, if you are a move-up buyer, if you're buying a single family, Joe, you do multi-units, condos as well?
Industrial and we do commercial spaces too.
Awesome. Very good. Please feel free to reach out to Joe. His email is jrichmond at sk, the number 8, homeinspectionservices.com. And his
Yes.
cell number 773-960-8893. Joe, thank you again for being on with us today. I appreciate, you know, just your willingness to share information. Of course, we know that, you know, buyers who are educated around the entire process, you know, typically stay in their homes longer. And what we're up to is creating multi-generational wealth through the acquisition of real estate. So thank you for sharing with us today. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share that I may not have mentioned or covered?
No, I think you did a pretty good job of covering everything.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much for joining us today. Hey guys, do me a favor. Will you call Joe when you're ready to schedule your home inspection? He is going to definitely take all good care of you. And thanks again for being with us today, Joe.
Okay.
All right. Have a great rest of the morning.
All right, you too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.